Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Better Way of Life. I hope you're having a lovely Friday, wherever you are, whatever it is you're doing. Now, Marianne, today we've got a wonderful guest who's going to be joining us in a minute, Sophie. But before that, just as we were having a little preemptive conversation, before Sophie's joining us, we were talking about language and language online. Where do you stand on language, and particularly sort of like swearing and stuff like that?
In real life? In
real life, yeah.
It stops me from losing my rag with people quite a lot.
Yeah.
And also, we were just saying just then about how, like, some people don't like it, some people do. For me, I think it helps me be quite expressive about what I want to say. It's not because I don't have good language, because I can use my words and use a very vast array of words. But I don't ever swear at anybody. I'd never ever have sworn at anybody. So for me, it's more of it adds a bit more clout to what it is I'm trying to say. Never.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, swearing's changed over the years, by the way, folks. If you didn't know, I mean, swearing. I think you gave the example of saying something like "oh my god" or "oh my gosh." The difference between the two. And I just want to point out to anybody who has a faith and is religious out there, that I'm saying this within the context of just talking around the language. And of course, actually a lot of swearing and early swearing was around blasphemous words, as opposed to perhaps words of a more sexual nature, of which a lot of swear words are now, which is quite interesting, isn't it? That we actually, when we swear using sexual words.
It's just a really difficult one, because we're back again to what one person finds offensive, somebody doesn't. So when people say, quite often I find, particularly when I'm teaching and there's men in the group, and I taught in a prison as well, and actually men are actually very respectful. Generally speaking, I've seen them very respectful. And I said, that's really kind of you, but unless you're swearing at me and unless you're being abusive to me, what language you choose to converse in is entirely up to you.
Yeah. But do you know that a lot of terms that we perhaps just use as almost throwaway terms now in the English language were once quite awful to say?
Yeah.
Right. Because they actually have their grounding in those kind of religious connotations. Do you know Gordon Bennett? Yeah. Do you know where that comes from?
I don't actually know.
Okay. So saying Gordon Bennett is nothing to do with Gordon.
No, because it's GAWD.
Yeah. All right, Gordon. It actually comes from God and Saint Benedict. It's actually blaspheming against God and Saint Benedict.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There you are. So, folks, without getting us banned from the universe or whatever, do put some comments in the comments as you watch this. Where do you stand on swearing? Is it, is it okay? Have we got, a little bit more blasé with it? I mean, certainly, swearing as a child. When I was young and if I swore, my parents would probably thrash me to death with a milk bottle. Not literally. That's obviously from the comedy sketch.
Countries. I lived in the States, and you might say something over there that would be seen as something that would be awful over here, and vice versa. I mean, they thought it was hilarious that I would say, I don't know if I can say it. Begins with a B and it's got hell at the end. But they thought it was really funny because I said it with a very posh accent. They would see. I don't know if that's classed as swear words. I don't know if that's classed as swear words.
I think that language difference between countries, etc., is really quite funny anyway. The sort of the difference, the dialectic change of language in different areas, and what it means in different areas can be quite amusing and quite funny. And we shall bring Sophie in at this point to say hello and join us in this conversation. So, Sophie,
Hi, hello.
Thank you for partly kind of causing this conversation this morning by talking about it.
Very happy to help.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember at university, a friend of mine from Manchester, he used to say, "Can I bum a fag?" on a regular basis. Yeah, you see, now you're all laughing, right?
Yeah, but I also know what you.
Yeah, and he meant, can I get a fag from anybody? But obviously, he couldn't say that in America, and for obvious reasons, right? And as of this day, and he found out the hard way. So it's. I just love that. I love the fact that actually you can say something somewhere, it can mean one thing. It's
that is an
completely.
example, though, of how you've got to try and think of everything that you say, not just from your perspective, but from the receiver's perspective as well, don't you?
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely.
This is so interesting hearing you talk about this, because I've lived outside of the UK for most of my adult life. So I've got friends from all over the world who are native English speakers or English speakers from other countries. And it's so funny how easy it is to offend someone without realizing it. And it's really interesting as well, because when you swear in a foreign language, because you don't have that reaction that you would have in your own language, so you'll just say it like a normal word, whereas if you were swearing in your own language, you kind of might look around first and check, should I say it or not? The number of times I've sworn in a foreign language not thinking anything of it, because it doesn't have the same effect on you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sophie, as I say, thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about you.
So I confuse people because I have a French surname. So my name is Sophie Le Brozec, because I married a French man many, many years ago. We're in the process of divorcing now. So now got to decide what I'm going to call myself moving forwards. But as you probably guessed from the accent, I am not French, but I did live there for 12 years and speak it fluently. And so I'm a Brit, but I've lived in Mauritius for the last 8 years. And which was a bit of a strange thing to do. I was living in London and decided to move here without knowing anyone, without ever having visited, and getting rid of 95% of my belongings and taking my then husband and 2 small kids on an aeroplane and not looking back. So
Wow.
And
tell us a bit about what you do.
So I run something called Life Reboot Camp, which is an online library of resources and global community for women who want to improve their life and relationships. So we look a lot at the romantic relationship, marriage or partnership, and how every part of your life has an effect on your relationship. So we look at things like self-love, we look at your work and career, we look at what it is to parent, because obviously, when you have kids, that puts a huge amount of pressure on your relationship. And it's a place for women to be able to ask for help and improve their relationship, or get ready to leave if they realize it's over. So yeah, and that's something I do online and have done that for the last 6 and a bit years.
I can see Marianne's desperate to dive in, and I know she's going to have loads and loads of questions for you. But quickly, very quickly, before you do, I just wanted to pick your brain on something quickly. Literally started in the last couple of weeks trying to pick up French using Duolingo. Does it work, or is there a better way of learning French? I mean, obviously, if I moved to France, that probably would help. But I just don't understand why all of these things, they always start with a boy and a cat. Why? And when does a boy and a cat come up? Right? It was the same when I was at school and trying to learn French the first time around. Where does a boy and a cat come into a conversation? Right?
I don't know. It's just that keeping it simple, isn't it? So in a past life, I actually used to teach French as a foreign language and English as a foreign language. And I remember I did a degree in languages. I did French and Spanish at university in Liverpool, John Moores. Shout out to any John Moores people out there. And I remember we went to spend a year abroad. So I did 6 months in Nice in France and 6 months in a town in Spain called Murcia. And I remember our Spanish lecturer saying to us, don't go to the lectures, don't go to university when you're there, get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, whichever you prefer, and learn the language with them. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, that's hilarious. He's so like rebellious. And then moved to the different countries and went, oh, that's interesting. That's actually how it works. So one of the best ways to learn a foreign language is with a boyfriend or a girlfriend of that language. Failing that, surround yourself with it as much as possible. So watch your favorite programs in that language, put the subtitles on, just as much as possible. The more you immerse yourself in it, the more you'll get.
So I used to
And
go
yes,
over when
and Duolingo is pretty good, I have to say.
I used to go over when I was, I think I started going over from the age of 11. I flew over there and see my pen friend. I literally spent 2 weeks with the family, and then we used to go camping with like 50 other French people and me. And so I had no choice but to just do it.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing how your brain will pick it up as well.
I think the relationship things is quite key there, isn't it? I mean, if you actually know that it's coming back to you from somebody else as opposed to a machine or set player or whatever, it makes complete difference, etc.
Yeah, no,
So,
definitely.
Yeah. And of course, but you see, I just don't understand why they don't start with food, because I mean, everybody needs to eat, right?
Definitely.
I just want to know how to order cheese, bread, lovely stuff, etc. So that's what I need to do. So
yeah, that needs to be the future of language learning. Start with the food.
I feel like I'm on one of those TV programs where your assistant hands you a note, which is just what's happened. So apparently, my son is ill at school and he needs picking up as soon as possible. That will happen. I will do that as soon as we're off air here. Poor lad.
Of parenting.
Yeah, it's the joys of parenting.
Oh yeah, mine are off. Yours are doing another week. Mine are off now, and then yours are. Why can't they just all have the same holidays, for goodness sake?
That would make it way too easy
to try and sort of work it all out.
Well, yeah, talking about that, I mean, I expect what you probably find as well is that for anybody that's got global a network and is working globally, it's probably different weeks in different countries as well. So, by the time you get that, it's probably like a 3 or 4 week period where somebody is disrupted. Just sort it out, and everybody in the world do the same thing. It would just be so much easier.
It would.
Of course, your way or my way.
Yeah.
Quickly, I've got a question. Can I ask a question?
Yes. Yeah.
Why did you start doing what you're doing?
Oh my goodness. So when I was about 15 years old, living in the UK, I decided I wanted to be the next female prime minister. Good. I thought I could do a much better job than Maggie Thatcher. Yeah. And I had this calling, if you want to call it that, to make people's lives better. And then I started looking into it and realized, oh my God, this is a horrible world. I don't want to be in that world. It's not me at all. I'm way too much of a sensitive person. I would just get way too upset. And so I kind of like dumped that and went off to study languages. Moved to France when I graduated from university and just did about 1,000 different jobs as I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. But always in the back of my mind had this thing about wanting to help people to live a happier life, a better life, and couldn't figure out how to do that. And then just before I turned 40, so I moved from London to Mauritius. And once I got settled in Mauritius, I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. I know what I want to do. How am I going to do it? And the more I looked for how I was going to do it, the further I got away. So I just stopped looking and I just started going for these walks in the forest every day. And I'd just walk and walk and walk. And then one day I came home from walking in the forest and literally downloaded, I mean, that's the only word I can use, like the whole of my Life Reboot Camp. I couldn't type fast enough. I was like, where is this coming from? And put it out there. And even now, like I listen to the lessons I've created and go, oh, that's a really good idea. I'm really like, I don't actually know where this came from. So yeah, it was a divine intervention. Could we call it that? I'm an atheist, but like it just felt very otherworldly. So yeah.
Where along the journey did you pick up skills from that led you to being good at what you do now?
I think I was always that person. So I'm from a big family. I've got 2 older sisters and 2 younger brothers. And I was always that person, primary school, secondary school, university. I was always the agony aunt. I was always the one that everyone went to get things sorted out for them. And then as I went into working in the corporate world, I was teaching businessmen and businesswomen English in France, and they'd spill their life stories to me, and I was like, you can tell me what you want as long as it's in English, and I'll correct you if you make mistakes. And so they tell me about, my husband doesn't understand me, and my kids this, and and I literally do this agony aunting whilst teaching English. And then I worked in an international company where I was started off as a I'm trying to think of a word in English, the personal assistant to the global vice president, and then ended up even in that being everyone's agony aunt in the office and the global offices. And so little by little, and then probably about 25 years ago, I discovered the world of personal development, and I'm a big reader. And so I just read and read and read. I read on average about 50 odd books a year, and love listening to podcasts, watching things on YouTube, documentaries, everything. So I'm just constantly absorbing information, and then I pick and choose the bits that I like and that work, and bits I think, no, that I don't actually agree with that. And then in the work I do, I'm constantly saying to someone, you need to read this book, or you need to listen to this podcast episode, or do you follow this person? Because I've just literally got this huge library of people and work and stuff that I can pull from my brain and direct people towards.
Do you know, that's so interesting. Well, I have had conversations with you anyway, but literally just earlier, Graham and I were having a conversation. So interesting you said this, and what I know about you, that I was saying about people doing coaching, and that people have said to me, oh, you should do it. And I was like, oh, well, like, it's not something I've done, but I kind of end up doing it. And a friend of mine said to me, but you talk a lot, but you listen a lot. And actually, when I look back at previous things that I've done, which when I've worked in care settings and stuff, that the feedback I had, and this is probably what you all have been doing, but won't even have known that you've done it, is that you have to give of yourself for people to give of themselves. And so sometimes I think some people that want to set out to have an idea about being a coach or helping people, that set out as in, this is what I'm going to do, probably aren't necessarily the people that would be so good. And like you said, people just would tell me stuff. So I'm like, people tell me all sorts of stuff as well. But I think it's because I tell that I wear my truth. And so you want people, I remember working in an eating disorders unit, and some of the residents saying that somebody else that talked to them, they said, she doesn't even tell us anything. Doesn't tell us her fiance's name. So why are we going to bare our soul? We have to go to the toilet in front of you. We have to do all sorts of stuff. And yet we don't know any of that stuff. So I think it's quite a thing that's
I think it's a question of, I was just going to say, I think it's just a question of feeling safe with someone, because
totally.
You want to know that, there's a sort of give and take. Because I suppose it kind of goes back to primary school, isn't it? When you told someone a secret and then they went and told the whole school. Whereas if you know someone else's secret, you kind of feel like, okay, I can trust you with my secret, because, it's a two-way street. But it's interesting you bring up the word coach, because I never really use it for myself, because I think that sounds like such a grown-up thing to be. And and so it's really funny, because I asked the women I work with, what would you call me? Because I, coach, mentor, I'm like, yeah, okay, those might be words. And actually they say, oh, you're like a mum, you're like a sister, you're like a friend. And I'm like, yeah, those things I can work with. That's all good, because, these people, some of the people I've worked with since when I first launched February 2018, they're still in my world, because when you get Life Reboot Camp, you get lifetime access, because I can't be doing with you got to keep paying or what have you. No, things happen in life. You need to be able to deal with it. So I want you to have access to it all the time whenever something happens. So I've got people who've been with me for 6 years. I've seen their kids grow up. So to me, they are like sisters, like friends, like, people I've never met and I've only ever seen on calls and things like that. And I think for me, a lot of people have come to me, have worked with coaches, like proper coaches, you know, and then they come to me and say, well, no, because I didn't get what I needed.
Yeah, it's interesting,
But it's
because
that,
I'd say I coach as well, but in a way. But oh, hello, dog. But here's the thing about coaches and the word coaches. A couple of things is that we live in a kind of coaching culture now where like it almost seems you like turn LinkedIn on or whatever, and it's like every other person is a coach and whatever. And there's two things that strike me about that. One is that I'm immediately kind of suspicious, and I'm sorry if you fall into this category out there, folks, of anybody that's like looks like that, you know, they could be one of my children, and or doesn't even look like they've hit puberty yet, who then is calling themselves a coach. Because and secondly, alongside that as well, anybody that's almost like too assured in terms of the whole route that they've taken to get them to that coaching as well, because I'm almost kind of more drawn to somebody that A, has got experience, and B, has kind of failed but then has come through the other side, or has learned stuff along the way, and or perhaps didn't even really know where they were going but then has worked out where they're going, just because you feel like they might have worked out life a bit more. You know, do you know what I'm saying about that?
You want to give your truth, though, wouldn't you, more?
Yeah. And you want to know that other people have been in the trenches as well, because otherwise you feel like a complete failure. If you're there bearing your soul and saying, you know, I'm failing at parenting, I'm failing at being a wife, I'm really struggling, I hate my job, whatever it might be, you don't want to be faced with little Miss Perfect who's like, oh yes, do this, that and the other. But obviously I would never be so stupid to fall into that situation myself. You know, you don't want that. You want someone to say, oh God, that happened to me too.
Do you know, and that's exactly. I had a friend yesterday saying to me that he had various counselling and not had particularly good experiences it, because we talk about the whole victim and perpetrator thing, which I can talk about in a bit. But that actually he said, you know, he said I turn around. He's been chucked out of sessions before, and he said, you know, I've said, I don't know anything about you. You know everything about me. He said, I don't know whether you go lap dancing at the weekend or whether you this or that. I said, I don't know anything. And he said, see, to me, that's why I've never found counselling the traditional type, because it feels a bit voyeuristic to me when that person can't give anything. And you know, I did a psychology degree and I had to think about what route I was going to go down. And I quickly was like, there's too many rules with all that. I can't. Because actually, to be able to connect with someone when you've got these rigid rules, even if it's the same with kids, you've got to bend those rules some way. You've got to have boundaries. But yeah, for me, it just all seems that voyeuristic feeling, and it's why probably I do the self-development. Rob Dial's my person at the moment. He's my one. That you find whatever it is that works. So for me, I'll do that development. I don't go into counselling. It would have to be a particular sort that isn't I'm going to sit here and just
listen to you.
You just sort of, and like you say, if they could just give a bit, I would probably give a bit more.
Otherwise, I think it feels very judgmental, doesn't it? It feels like, you know, I'm here on trial, and you're back there sitting there, and they're not really saying anything. They're just like, You're like, oh no. Do you think I'm this? Do you think I'm that? Should I not have said that?
I lost my dad to suicide, and I ended up, one of my friends got a counselling psychology doctorate, so she knows her stuff. She knows an awful lot of stuff. Anyway, I had a conversation with her one day, and I said I help run retreats for people that have lost people, and I've got some dear friends that I've met, and I said I see people that have had counselling, and that might work for some people, or they can't get it, or it's too expensive, or whatever. Groups, they work for some people, they don't work for other people. I said, I just feel like there needs to be something where you've got like a buddy or something, because a lot of the time someone wants to go without somebody judging them, or just going, yeah, I know what you mean. Not, I totally get you, because you don't totally get someone. And my friend said to me, but any good counsellor would be able to be that. And I went, no, I said, you missed it. I'm not talking about what their skills are. I'm talking about that interaction you have. I said, I've never lost a baby. I wouldn't feel, to me, that given what I was trying to offer, that I would be able to, I wouldn't have that relationship with somebody that had, because I haven't, and that's what I was trying to see, that's what I would be wanting to create, is that safe space, as you said, that, you know, we've laughed about things in the groups I've got to, or with people I've spoken to, that I couldn't necessarily do with somebody that I knew hadn't gone through that.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that, because so last year I ended my marriage of nearly 20 years whilst working, you know, helping women with their relationships. And it's really interesting because a well-meaning friend said, oh, well, how can you carry on doing the work you do if you just ended your marriage and, you know, you've now broken home and single mom and all this stuff? And I said, actually, I realized that it's taken my work to another level, because now I can see both sides of the coin. I can see how to work on the relationship, how to make it better, but also to know when to cut your losses. And it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
You know, and so many other things, like my two daughters are now, we're fairly certain that they are neurodivergent with autism and ADHD. So I have so much understanding and respect and patience for women who I work with who are neurodivergent or who are parenting neurodivergent kids. I get it. And there's going to be things that I don't get. And in which case, you know, I'll say, you can come and join me, but you might not find what you want here. Like, I only tend to work in heterosexual relationships just because I don't have a clue.
Exactly.
I don't have a clue in same-sex relationships. So I wouldn't want to say, yes, come and join me and I'd love to help you, and you know, talk absolute rubbish. So I think when you've been down a path, it makes it so much easier to have that conversation.
And it comes back down to the label thing as well, doesn't it? I mean, that's where, again, getting away from labels and actually talking about what it is that you personally offer is the important thing. Because you say relationship coach. I mean, if you typed relationship coach, for example, into Google now, you'd get the full spectrum between people that were talking about, you know, how to maintain a good marriage, to, you know, how to maintain relationships full stop in your life, to people talking about how to do better in bed. Yeah, and it literally the full gamut, you know, and you wouldn't necessarily know what you were getting out of all that.
For me, what I feel really appealing about what you do is, particularly, it's that guilt. I've got, you know, lots of friends who their relationships broken down for whatever reason, and there's a lot of guilt that whichever way round, which actually, I mean, I still talk about this. I say society is the biggest hypocrite going, to be quite honest. Because you actually ask most people, they're doing stuff that they don't really want to do because society says they should. And I think if everybody just knew their own truth a little bit more, then actually everybody would be a lot happier. And so to hear that to say that, yes, if that's the best thing for you, then that's great. We can work at that. But actually, for a whole host of reasons, you know, I've got my eldest is nearly 16. He's, well, the school had done the forms properly. It would be he's autistic. And that explained a whole host of things that has put a strain on my marriage. That I had a child that didn't sleep, literally wouldn't go to bed on his own. A husband who was away a good chunk of the week. Me working, not because I had to necessarily, but I wanted to as well, because that's what I wanted to do. Child that wouldn't go to bed, you know, then speaking to a health visitor and going, I don't know what to do. And they just said, put him in your bed. So I was really happy. Then people said, oh, you're making a rod for him in bed. I said, I don't care what rod I'm making, if it means I can go to sleep. But actually, I've got a son now that had a relationship problem last week and came and got into bed with mum. And he's nearly 16. And I said, come up with me. And he said, because he said, take my phone away from me because I know I'm going to message her and I don't want to. And I said, good lad, you know. And then he thanked me the next day and he said, thank you. And I said, sometimes you just need to put your head with somebody else's so you're not in your own head. And I feel that a lot of that came about from the fact that I did what he needed when he was younger. However, it did have maybe consequences that of course it was people saying to me, you should do this, you oughtn't to do that, I wouldn't do that. And I said, well, until you're in my house supporting me with that, with the child that won't go to bed, quite frankly.
But you know what? People are going to judge you no matter what you do. So I had my eldest daughter in France, where basically you put the baby in their own room from the day you get back from hospital, completely separate. And, you know, the mum preferably doesn't breastfeed because God forbid that, you know, your body doesn't get back to the way it's supposed to be like that. God forbid that you might, you know, damage your chest for, you know, men in your life. And then 6 years later, I had my youngest in London, where everyone was shocked that she was sleeping in her own room, but because her big sister wanted her in the room with her. And, you know, so in one country, and then I breastfed in the UK. So in the UK, I was, you know, celebrated that I breastfed. In France, I kept being told, why on earth are you doing that? Why on earth are you breastfeeding? You know, and it's so interesting that I did pretty similar, you know, raise them pretty similar in the two different countries, but was judged on some things in one and not judged, you know, it's crazy. It's these rules that don't necessarily have people's best interest at heart.
Because what is best interest? Because you're back again, aren't you? That I was talking to someone the other day who was maybe 60-ish, I think, maybe mid-60s, maybe, and she was saying about her husband, and she said, I think they were going to move because she wanted to be near the sea, and she said it wasn't really what her husband wanted, and she said that basically you could see she was staying because that's what you did. And then we were referring to somebody who else we knew was a little bit older, and she said because that's what those people did. And so the advice often people of my age, your age, because I know it's the same, would be of the advice that was from their parents, that you ask those people, say, were you happy? Not really. Well, you're now but it all comes down to that sort of shaming to step out. And as you saw the video I shared yesterday, and the reason I shared that was because I look at it now and it still feels quite raw. I like looking at that because it reminds me how far I've come. But I just want, and you've said it quite a few times, I just want, for me, the biggest thing was that it's not about getting a diagnosis necessarily, but it's about, for me, it gave me permission to just be me and think, I don't really care. If you matter, then I'll listen. But actually, all these judgments, like you say, they're going to judge anyway. So for me, sharing that video, it was about, and all the work that you do, and as you just said, people are going to judge anyway. And as Rob Dial says in the one I was listening to last week about shoulding, stop shoulding on yourself.
Yeah,
it's so true, because actually, he said, I'll ask people, what is it you want to do? Well, I want this, but I should do this because my mum this. And he said, I wasn't asking about your mum or your sister or your dad or your colleague. I was asking about you, what you really want. And I think from what you do the same as I do, it's about giving other women and men, because I do speak to men as well, that permission to just be, because most people probably agreeing with you anyway.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. I remember Glennon Doyle, I can't remember if I heard it on a podcast of hers or whether I read it in one of her books, but she told her kids, and I love this, and I say this to my kids as well, you should always disappoint other people before you disappoint yourself, including your mum. And I say to my girls, I'm like, disappoint me as much as you want. Do what is right for you. And that, when you start getting that into your head, that makes such a difference, because then you're like, well, hang on a minute, what do I want for me? That changed it.
Where were you left? I mean, Graham, you probably feel a bit left out now being a man, but I think for a woman, there is, again, I was talking about this yesterday to somebody about how it was a male I was speaking to that hadn't had children. His marriage is breaking down. And I was saying about how as a female, sometimes you're thrust into this school thing. I mean, I read Playground Mafia, the book, which was so funny because it was so real, that I wasn't me for many years. I'd fall out with all these women, which now I'm diagnosed, which has helped me understand my head. I was like, I never really liked all of them. So I was trying to accommodate all these people that they weren't my people. I'm sure they were lovely, but they weren't my people. And it's just this, you're thrust into a whole world of, as you said, do this, don't do that, you ought to do that. You know, I didn't wear my first son, but I did my second one. I breastfed the second one. He's having heart surgery tomorrow, so he hadn't been very well for, you know, I was longer. People used to say, you're amazing, aren't you? And I went, no, I'm doing it. It works. And I don't have to get out of bed to make a bottle. I couldn't give a monkey's what to do.
Yeah.
You know, so I think as a female, it is very difficult to constantly have all these things.
Definitely. It's like that America Ferrera's speech in Barbie, isn't it? It's like, no matter what you do, you're going to do it wrong. You're going to be judged. You'll do it wrong no matter what you do. And I think the sooner you realize this, particularly for women, but for everyone in life, that you're going to be judged and found lacking and failing. So you might as well do what actually makes you happy. And then at least you're winning on one front.
Although you say that, but and this kind of brings us back to one of our other favorite topics of conversation, which is social media. Yes, you should do what makes you happy, but sometimes moving between where you are and maybe what makes you happy isn't that simple or easy. I mean, and I'll give the example of that. The amount of posts, for example, again on social media, we see a lot of them on LinkedIn about put yourself first so that you can look after other people. Yeah, it's a very easy rhetoric to spout, but it quite often is coming from a place of someone that's ultimately quite selfish, right? Because you can see from their lifestyle that, you know, if they are married or they've got kids or whatever, they choose to completely ignore what their family wants in order to make sure that they get what they want first. Sorry, folks, if you do that, but that, do you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. I think the secret for me and what I teach is to go incrementally. So I explain to women and mums in particular the importance of having me time, because most of the time we give it up completely. When we have our kids, we lose it. We're either working or we're mummying, and there's nothing. We lose ourselves. And so what I say is start with 5 minutes. 5 minutes every day. Where can you grab 5 minutes that's just for you? For no one else, not for your kids, not for your partner, not for your boss, not for you, and then build it up.
Doable stuff.
Yeah. Are you going to sit and have a cup of tea and drink it while it's hot, reading a book, or just sitting in the garden, or whatever it might be, and then build it up? Could you then make that going to the cinema at the weekend and watching a film, a couple of hours? Could you then make it a half day at the weekend, once a month? You know, build it up, build it up, build it up. So you're not then me, but you've got this time where you can recharge your batteries. Those around you have got used to it. So my kids grew up with me having a me day. So they knew. So most of the time my me day was spent at home. And so they would come up to me and say, Mummy. And I'd say, it's my me day. You need to go and see Daddy. No, but Mummy. I said, no, I'm not here. Oh, yeah, you are. And I'd say, yeah, I am here, but I'm not. Daddy is here. He's ready to look after you, to do what you need. But today is Mummy's day. And being a mum of girls, I feel this is very important, because then the rest of the time I'm there. What do you need? Okay, let's talk. You want to talk about emotions? You want to talk about this, that, and the other? I am there. And I have a great relationship with my kids because of it. Like, you know, my 17-year-old says to me, she says, no one knows my life more inside out than you do. Not one single friend. She's like, you know all of it. And they're then growing up knowing I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to take time for me. I don't have to martyr myself.
Because it's not all about quantity, is it? I know with mine, I mean, I went back to work when my eldest was 3 months old. A, because I had to, but also it probably was good for me, to be quite honest. And the amount of judgment I had from people, how awful it was. And I said, you know what? I might have thought that you stayed off for too long, but I was too polite to say that to you. But I never would, because if that's what works for you, and actually my kids have always seen, you know, I work away, if I want to lie in, I'll lie in. And mine have learned to bring me a cup of tea. And
Happy days.
And all the things that they do are because they've learned that I'm a person and I do the things that I want to do because that's what. But I think, Graham, it's interesting what you were saying there, that because I know where you're coming with this and I see it. So when I do, I do the teacher training and I have people from all different sectors, and I've said it to you before, so often, and I'm not being sexist here because it's actually what I see, and women smile at me on the course because they know that I call men out on this, not all. So they'll have to do a micro teach. So they'll have to teach everybody something for 15 minutes on the last day. And this look of dread comes over women's faces because they go, I don't know what I'm going to do. Because I say you can do it about work or pleasure. And they go, I don't do anything. Generally, women will go, I don't do anything. Whereas the men will go, I'll do it on golf, I'll do it on football, this kind of stuff. So they'll know straight away. Then we get all the jokes about, so one of them was saying about golf, I said, do you play frequently? Yeah, but the missus doesn't like it. And I say, well, how do you mean? Well, when I'm gone all day. And I say, well, there's a missus here that might, And it's that, the narrative I hear from women, and I'm pretty sure I've probably done it in the past, that I'm just going to nip to the shop. I'm just going to nip to the gym. I'm going to rush to do that. I won't be long. And I probably still, I will say it, and sometimes my boys will say to me, why are you saying you're going to be in a hurry? Why don't you go? And I have to say, my husband was always very good, that he would say, if I was going to go shopping, he'd say, I'll stay here with the boys, you just go and enjoy it, because otherwise we're all going to be there, you're going to be stressed, we're going to be hacked off, and it will end up in a row, probably. So I do like the fact boys understand now that it's not that I have to, because my youngest seems to find it strange that when they have International Women's Day, they had somebody that came in that was banging on about this and that, because he says, aren't we all the same? Which is interesting to see it from that point of view, that probably because he's been brought up by a mum who, I don't care what someone has between the legs. If you can do the job, you do the job. And similarly, we do whatever jobs we do here, and that they've just seen that I work and I go to work. I still have a little bit of guilt now that they're older and I'm now working away more. And whereas my husband used to be away 4 days a week, always. And I have to keep saying to myself, now it's your time. They will still live. You're at the end of a phone, and it's you that they come to when, like Tim said the other day, I knew that I got to my limit with offering a relationship advice, and it was your time. So he said, I offered it over to you, because he said, I knew that you wanted to come. You needed to come. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. So Graham, I think what it is for you, where what you're saying about it's those, again, I'm not sound really sexist, when it's men that will say just be selfish, and they'll use that word, which I don't like the use of that, and think of yourself, because actually, as you're saying, it's because there's a woman probably at home that's allowing them to be that.
I see it from both sexes actually these days on things like LinkedIn. I'd like to kind of just grab Sophie's view on this, which is that and we've talked about this a lot, which is that I believe it's to do with the way that we have a conversation in the first place with people, because I think we come at conversations with our assumptions rather than have a conversation first about where we are both, and then from that kind of work out each other's perspective and boundaries as well. So a really good example of that is, I find as a man quite a lot that I get asked about perhaps taking part in things from a business point of view, and it's always kind of assumed that the childcare will be there at home, that I won't need to be involved with that. I won't need to be, I can just go out and do whatever I like all of the time. Now, as you know, I'm pretty much the stay-at-home dad, because it's my wife that's out. I'm the one that's here. That used to be reversed. And that's given me an incredibly clever perspective on that as well, because I just now see where those conversations come from, and then I have to have a conversation about, well, it's not as easy as that. I can't just go out, right? And I have to think about childcare, and I don't just have childcare, etc.
You had a message, didn't you? Come out just now. You had a message.
Yeah, exactly. But and they're just going to have to wait a minute, because I am in the middle of working, and I will get to that as soon as I, don't worry, folks, he will be all right. We'll get there. But the thing is that if we have those conversations first about, this is what my life looks like, this is how I live my life, this is where I need to be able to support these people, then people wouldn't necessarily frame it in the same way. And what I tend to find is, as soon as I start saying, like I was asked to an event the other day, and I said, well, I literally can't go because of this, that, and the other. And what I then find is that, you then get, oh, well, actually, I do understand. And it's like, well, why don't we have that conversation first? So you understand what my life is like at the start. So then we won't be having this ping pong tennis kind of, let's get into that space. We'd actually know. Yeah. Pretending,
isn't it? People are having to sort of put that, like you said, when you've got this person in front of you, there's all this, well, actually that person's probably got a whole heap of stuff. And oddly, they probably get back more from their client. I don't like that word, but if they just let that guard down.
And I think sometimes people will say what they think is happening, not necessarily what they believe or support or whatever, but because they think, well, you're a man, therefore you're able to do X, Y, Z. And then as soon as you say, well, actually, that's not how it is for me, it's like, oh, wow, actually, that's reassuring to me. Whereas if we go into everything with a clean slate and say, right, I don't know what your situation is, I don't know what's easy or hard for you or what your setup is, it's easier to be more accommodating, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's that being authentic again, though, isn't it? It comes all the way back to, just before you came on, we were talking about how I was saying about what I do, that being authentic bit. It's not just with the training, because I train other people to train. It's about almost training other people to be themselves, so that then when they work with people, they can be themselves instead of that whole sort of pretending.
Well, I think if we can just drop the pretense, everything just gets so much better. But people are so afraid of being judged, so they go into theatrics and like put on their costume and their mask, and I'm going to play the successful businesswoman who doesn't have a care in the world, when I've actually, got mastitis, I've got a baby at home that's not sleeping, or whatever it might be, because this is what the world is expecting from me. And then I'm exhausted and I'm stressed because I'm pretending to be someone I'm not.
Everyone's pretending. And then when you get the males, so I get a lot of males I teach, and I say to them, if you can be this in a room with me, and you can open up to the guy next to you that you think you're never going to see again, and you feel okay with that, take that back to work. Because actually, so many men I speak to, I say, you've told me all this stuff. It's okay. It really is okay, because it's likely that he's thinking it. He is, and he is. And that's absolutely okay.
It is.
And this thing is, there's such a mental health crisis going on, and particularly with men. And if we could just say, do you know what? It's all okay. Can we just assume that everyone is doing their best with what they have and with what they know at any one time, and stop judging each other for what we think they're doing? And sorry.
And ask them, are you happy?
No, it's fine.
Are you happy?
Because if we all did that, you know what would happen?
Better way of life.
We'd have a better way of life.
Exactly
that, which is where it comes. It's where it comes from. Sophie, we could talk forever, and we possibly will at some point. But we have to finish there, folks, and mainly because it is kind of time, but also I've got to go and pick Barnaby up. I'm keeping it real. All right. So thank you so much for coming on today. Hopefully, folks, you've enjoyed the conversation. If you have, please do connect with us and Sophie and carry on the conversation. That's what we want to make these about. Starting some thought process with you, making you think, getting the old brain ticking in the morning. If it has for you today and you've got a question, please do ask Sophie as you see her online during the day.
Pleasure.
We will be back with more of the same next week. But until then, I hope you've had a great Friday. Have a great Friday. There's still plenty of it to go. If you're listening back to this on the old Spotify or whatever, it might be a different day of the week. That's just a bit of a mind thing to get around, isn't it? But we hope you have a good day as well. Until next time, bye for now.